Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Katie Marie, and on this channel we like to talk about all things eyeshadow palettes. And in today's video I have a new multiple looks plus review video sharing with you guys a new palette that recently launched, and I've had so much fun playing with it, and I want to share all those looks with you guys as well as my review of the palette. And the palette, as you guys saw from the thumbnail, is the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette. This palette launched not too long ago, and look at this. Look at this color story, so very pretty. It's my first time trying Blend Bunny Cosmetics shimmer shadow, so I was really curious, but I love the tones in these. Yes, it's a rainbow palette, but there is a specialness when it comes to the tones that are within this, and there's just more of that grunge, that kind of like, you know, she took inspiration from nature with the Primal palette, and you can definitely feel that and see that within the shadows. So I was super into this palette. I love the cover, the color story looks so fun and inspiring, so I did a bunch of looks for you today, and we're going to dive into it. If you're new to my videos, I like to go in depth on each of the shadows as I'm using them and kind of share with you guys my experience with the shadow as I'm putting them on my eyes. So as we go through the tutorial, that's what we're going to be focusing on, and I'm just going to kind of review each individual shadow that I use in the tutorial. And then after all the tutorials are done, I'll kind of come in at the end and give you guys my overall thoughts and, you know, opinions on this palette and if I really enjoy it. And we're also going to touch on how it compares to the only other palette I have from Blend Bunny, but her Blends palette. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, let's get right into it. Before we get into the tutorials though, I do want to swatch this palette out on my arm, so we're going to jump right into that, and then we'll dive straight from there into the tutorials. So let's get right into it. All right, let's get right to it. After priming my eyes, I'm going to just jump into that Instinct shadow, and I'm going to be packing that on my outer corner. This shade had a lot of nice pigment to it. It's a really nice dark purple, almost like a dark purple blue. But yeah, just putting that on, very nice and pigmented, no issues, you know, getting it to show up. I just built it up until I liked the color that I got. And then on top of that, I'm going to be taking Exotic and just kind of blending it into the shade to give a little bit of lightness around the edges of that deepest shade that I put in there. And I'm also bringing it into the crease. This shade also goes on really nice, no big complaints. It's a nice bright color and it blends in and blends out very nicely. The last step for my outer corner, I'm going to take Winged, and I'm blending this on top. This is a very light shade to kind of do like next step after Exotic, so you're going to see me spend a little bit of time just working and blending this out against those other shades. And I'm also going to go back and take Exotic and go a little bit higher just to kind of help the blend and everything like that. But it's like such a light shade, I feel like you can't see it on my skin tone, so I wouldn't have minded if this shade had a little bit more pigment and intensity to it, even though it is supposed to be a very light color. Dipping into Mimic, I'm going in the inner crease. This one, as you can see, it's got a lot more intensity to the color, so I feel like you can really see it on my lids, you can really see it on my skin tone, and it stands out and definitely is, you know, just blended into that inner crease. Really going into the shimmer Regal, I'm putting this on, and as you can see, this shade did not, well, it did stick, but it just took a little while to stick. It's got like a Super Shock type of formula, and so trying to pick it up on a flat brush was not the easiest. It's definitely a shade that I think would pick up easiest and go on smoothest if you just use your finger. I did go ahead and grab some glitter glue and then went back in to the shade to see if that would help it stick a little bit better, and it definitely did. It showed up a little bit more intense like I was wanting to, but overall this shade Regal is just, it's not my favorite in the palette because that one and Morph tend to have more of that Super Shock formula, and the rest are more of just a regular type of shimmer that's easier to pick up with a flat brush. So just something something to keep in mind. For the next shimmer, I'm going to take Potent, and I'm putting this on the rest of the eye. And as you can see, like this one is not that Super Shock formula, so it goes on the eye a lot easier, picks up on the brush a lot easier, and has more pigment to it, so it just applies a lot easier to the eyes all around. I found it was just a lot easier to work with, and I really did enjoy this shade. I really did enjoy this formula. It's got a lot of sparkle to it, and yeah, it was just overall really easy, and it blended into the yellow very nicely as well. Just to blend the shimmer to the matte, I'm taking Exotic once again and just kind of tapping it over there to make sure that the blend between the shimmer and the matte is as seamless as I can get it. And then moving on to my lower lash line, I'm just going to take that Instinct and just smudge it right into my lower lash line there. Nothing too crazy. It's nice and dark and intense, exactly what I was looking for. And then taking Wing once again, I'm going to spend some time to try to build it up so it's a little bit more evident and you can see it. And then once that's blended out nicely, I decided to take Untamed and pop this in the inner half. And this is like a gorgeous neon orange. I absolutely love this shade. It showed up so intensely, so quickly. I was super impressed. And then I just used for my inner corner highlight, my face highlight. I forgot to record that, but this is going to be the completed look. And I really love the combination of the orange and the yellow with the purple. It's just such a gorgeous look. And overall, I really loved how it turned out. My only kind of qualm was, messing with the Regal shade. That shimmer just wasn't the easiest to blend. And then also Winged, I just wish it had a little more oomph to the shadow and stood out a little bit more on my eyes. But overall, very pretty, very happy with it. Okay, next look, I am changing up the eyeshadow primer per usual, and then I'm going to jump into that Toxin shade. I could not wait to dive into this shade just because it looks so intense. And as you see, it's going on really nicely, very bright. It's not as intense as I thought it would be. After trying Untamed, that like neon orange, I was expecting a little bit more depth to this kind of neon green, but as you can see, it shows up a little bit more like a lighter lime green or like lighter neon green, which is still pretty. It's just something I was a little bit surprised about. And then going into Warning, I'm going to use that on the outer half and just mesh and blend the two together. This shade, just like Untamed, is like a neon type of peachy pink shade. It's absolutely beautiful. A little bit goes a very long way. This is another shade. Untamed and Warning are just so neon, so intense, and they pack such a punch. You don't need to use much in order to get like full impact with the shade. Then for my outer corner, I am taking Lethal and I'm packing this on the outer corner and blending it up into that Warning shade that I put on, and just spending some time blending it out. This is a nice deep shade. As you can see, it goes on super smoothly, super easy, very intense, and I was very happy with the way I was able to blend the outer corner in with what I put in my crease. I just kind of went back and forth between the two brushes, and I was very happy with the blend that I got here. Then taking a really tiny brush, I just took a touch of Camouflage and I'm using it to deepen up the green, because kind of like I was saying, it wasn't as deep and as intense of like a neon green as I was expecting, so I wanted to deepen up my crease a little bit more before putting on my shimmer. So I used just a touch of Camouflage and it did exactly what I wanted. And then once that was done, I'm prepping my lid with a little NYX glitter primer, and then I'm going to take that yellow shimmer Regal once again. This time, because I put the glitter primer down, it did go on a little bit smoother, but still it's a shadow that I kind of have to, just kind of grin and bear it and put it on. And once it's on, it's beautiful, but it's just not the easiest to get on my brush and not the easiest to apply. But once you get it on there, it's a very pretty shadow, and definitely having glitter primer down definitely helped it go on a little bit easier. Once that was down, I took Slither and I'm packing this on the outer half. This Slither shade is a lot deeper than I was expecting. For whatever reason, I just wasn't expecting it to be this dark. So once I put this down, as you can see, it shows up very easily. It takes like no work to build this color up. It's very pigmented and shiny. And then once that was down, I had to go back and forth between both of the shimmers to kind of get that blend to be as seamless as I could, because I wasn't expecting it to be so dark in comparison to the gold that I put on the inner half of the lid. Once that was done, I just kind of blended where the shimmer and the outer corner meet per usual, and then finished my face and going right into my lower lash line. I'm just taking that darkest shade Lethal and smudging it out on my lower lash line like I do, and then taking a little bit of Ray. I'm using this to blend out and just soften up that dark red that I put down, and mostly keeping it to my inner half of my lower lash line. And this shade was really pretty. I thought it was nicely pigmented and it showed up very well. So remember to do my inner corner highlight. On camera here, I'm using the Melt highlighter. I'll link it down below because I can't remember off the top of my head. But once I put that on, that is the completed look. And this eye look, I really liked how it all came together. I was expecting, like I said, Slither to be a little bit more brighter, but even with the depth that it brings this look, I feel like it is still a very pretty and cohesive look altogether. And I enjoyed wearing it. And wear time for this, I was very happy with. The shimmer is for the most part stayed very nicely on my lid. The yellow, I noticed a little bit of wear down, just kind of like, I could see some lines at the end of the day and whatnot, but Slither, I didn't notice any kind of movement, and they both are so sparkly throughout the day. They look very, very pretty. And then with the mattes, also really nice wear time. I didn't notice any kind of fading or creasing throughout the day. Okay, third look, I'm using a different primer per usual, and then I'm going to go right into that neon orange. I really wanted to use this in a look and kind of showcase it more. Untamed is such an intense and beautiful shadow. I used a duo fiber brush because I wanted to go a little bit lighter with it on the inner half, and as you can see, it helped it not be too crazy and intense, and I definitely was able to get a nice soft blend out from this shade since there's no kind of like really light orange in this palette on that top row. So that's what I used, and I just took a little bit of extra time to blend out the orange, but as you can see, very pigmented, very beautiful, very easy to work with. Next up, I'm going to take Ray, and I'm putting that kind of in the middle, and this shade is nicely pigmented but a little bit thinner in like pigment to the orange, which I was a little bummed about because I was hoping to get a little more intensity there, but still very nice and pigmented and goes on easy. And then last up, I took Toxin, and this is probably like the thinnest of all three, so I feel like I should have swapped all of these because it would have just looked a little bit better because there's so much intensity on the inner half of my eye, and then it gets really light on the outer half. But just something to keep in mind with this palette. Overall, just packing on that green and blending it into the yellow before I'm going to go on to the outer corner, which I'm going to use that green camouflage, and I'm just packing this on the outer corner. As I said, I did feel like I had a little bit of issue with the sticking down where I put the light green, so with this palette in the future, I will definitely always work dark to light instead of, in this case, I worked light and then I stuck a dark on there. And it's not that it was patching or, you know, balding in areas, but it's just right around the edge where I'd already put down that light green. I just noticed it being a little bit lighter than I liked it to, and just looked a teeny bit off. The area that was giving me, you know, the most kind of pause was where I was going to put my wing liner, so it wasn't a big deal, but just something to note is sharing with you guys. I definitely think with this palette in the future, I always am going to work dark to light and not bother trying to work light to dark because I feel like you're going to have more issues with maybe balding or patching or something like that. Once that was done, I just cut my crease, and then I'm going to take Prey, and I'm packing this on the first half. I wanted to see how different these looked just because they don't look that different, kind of like I was talking with the first look and Winged. They don't look that different in the pan, and they look so light. So anyway, packing on some Prey, and then once that's packed on, I put right after that some of Luna, which is supposed to be like the lightest green, and I'm packing that on as well. And as you can see, I don't really see a difference between Prey and Luna at all on my lid. And then after that, to kind of mesh it and marry it to the dark green, I took a little bit of Toxin and I tapped it on there last. And as you can see Toxin a little bit, but honestly, Prey and Luna, it almost just looked like I had a white on and then a little bit of a lighter green before getting to the darker green. And I don't know, I was just a little bummed. I wish Prey and Luna, while they were light and they're, you know, supposed to be like very light colors to be able to blend things out, I wish they would have had a little bit more saturation of the color so that you could actually tell what color it is when you use them. But anyway, I'm using the black Nocturnal on my lower lash line to just blend it out. I didn't use the black too much in all the looks that I did just because the dark shades in this palette are so very dark. I just found it almost unnecessary. But anyway, once that was down, I put Camouflage down, and then I'm going to just take a little bit of that Ray shade and blend it into the dark green. And I thought my lower lash line turned out really, really pretty. Very happy with how all that blended. And then just popping on my inner corner highlight with my what I used for my face that day, and that was the completed look. This look lasted so well. I mean, it's an all matte look, so I wasn't expecting it to have any issues at all, honestly, but it lasted really well. But I do admit that I wish it would have had a little bit more impact when it came to my lid colors looking a little bit more yellow green, and also on the outer corner with Ray and Toxin. I just wish it would have packed a little bit more of a punch in the same way that Untamed, that orange does. But even with those little qualms about the look, I do think overall it turned out very pretty, and it lasted really nicely throughout the day, so always a win in my book. All right, moving on to look for priming my eyes. This is with a sticky primer that doesn't have a whole lot of color to it. And then I'm gonna go right into Instinct and pack this on the outer corner per usual. This shade I've already used before, so nothing too new here, but just packing it on. And definitely with the tacky base, I noticed it like kind of sticking down, and not that it didn't want to move, but it stuck down and was just a little bit harder to kind of blend out the edges. Just something to notice with a very sticky, tacky type of eyeshadow base. And then going into Exotic, I know this is kind of feeling like the first look that we did, and I'm so sorry about that. I didn't realize that at the time. But Exotic, I'm just kind of sticking right on top of that, not going too far, not doing as much as I did the first time, but definitely blending that on top before I go ahead and just take it all the way in. I kind of changed my mind as I was creating the look and decided to take it all the way into my inner corner just to get a nice deep purple depth in my crease before I moved on to the next shade, which was going to be Mimic, and I am just blending that and building that up right in my inner crease. And it's going to take a little bit of time to really build it up. It definitely shows up and you can see it, but as you can see, it's still such a soft color that I felt like it didn't help that blend between that, you know, exotic shade and the lighter shade. It just took a lot of kind of going back and forth to get the blend that I was looking for. And then pausing on that, I went ahead and went over to Warning, and I'm using this to blend out my outer corner. Now Warning, oh my goodness, I think I've already said this, but it is a very intense shade. So once I put it on, I'm going to take some time to really work at blending out those edges and just making it nice and diffused, because it was just so much more intense than I anticipated. Absolutely gorgeous. And then taking a touch of black, I'm just going to take this on my lower lash line as well, like I did before, and just blend it out before taking a touch of Mimic and using this to blend out the black. I really like how Mimic and Warning kind of work together to diffuse and blend out the black, but you still got the depth from the black. And overall, just that the blend from my lower lash line up into my crease was very beautiful and effortless. And then once I put on a little bit of glitter primer, I'm going to just dive right into the shimmers, which I'm taking Feral and packing this. This shade is unexpectedly like bright and neon, very easy to pick up, very smooth to apply with a brush. I was really happy about that. But as you can see, it's just a very intense color. I was really surprised with how intense it was. And then once that was down, I went ahead and took that Morph shade, and this one, as I said, it has more of the same consistency and feel as Regal, the yellow. However, it's a lot easier to pick up on your brush than Regal is, so I'm not sure what that's about, but placing it down, this shade also is so intense and vibrant. I was absolutely pleasantly surprised by how beautiful of a blend this was. And then I'm just going to go back and forth between Feral and Morph like I usually do, and just make sure the blend is as seamless and effortless as I can get it. And then just taking a touch of Exotic, I'm just going to make sure there's no harsh line between where the shimmer and the matte meet, and then that is pretty much the look. I'm just going to finish out with my inner corner highlight, which is I just used whatever I used on my face that day. And yeah, that's going to do it for the look. I really liked how this look turned out. It was definitely a different look for me than what I usually go for, I feel like, when it comes to colors, but I was kind of taking inspiration from my shirt that day. And overall, the shimmers are just absolutely beautiful. The mattes, like I was saying, they all blended out nicely, but there's just some that are more intensely pigmented than others. So definitely something to learn with this palette is which ones kind of work best and kind of like have a more effortless blend when you work them together than others. Some are just have a lot of more impact, like that Warning shade. I could not believe how intense and vibrant that color is. Okay, moving on to the last look. This was the last eyeshadow primer I tried, and then I'm just gonna dive right into Ink. This shade is also really intense. Like I was saying, yeah, I really didn't use the black too much in all of these looks, just because I felt like that dark row that she provided in this palette gave all of the intensity that I like in my outer corner. So as you can see, this blue goes on really nicely and has a lot of really nice depth. And then I'm gonna go into Poisonous, and I'm putting this right on top and bringing it into my crease. These two colors are pretty close together. Obviously one's a little bit lighter and brighter, but I found them to be very, very close, so it was very easy and effortless to get the two to mesh and blend together. And then going into Warning, I'm taking this right into my crease, and once again, just such an intense color. Like, oh my goodness, a little bit goes a very long way, and then you can blend, spend some time blending it out. You can definitely get an effortless blend for sure with this shade, but just a little goes a long way. It's got a lot of pigment to it. Taking a bit of Nectar, I'm using that to kind of blend out Warning, just to make sure it's nice and soft and nothing too harsh, before I take a little bit of Luna, and I'm putting this on top of the blue outer corner that I had going on there. This one, as you can see, you can definitely see the green, and I was wanting it to kind of go from like blue to green, but again, it's a little bit of a softer color. It doesn't pack as much intensity in the color that the inner corner has, but spending some time building it up and just mixing it in with Warning, it kind of created an orange where the green and the more pinky met, and I thought that was a neat little effect to the palette to kind of help make sure that the green stood out and didn't get too lost in the blue, I went ahead and took a little bit of camouflage, and I'm just putting this right in between the dark blue and the lighter green Toxin. And I think this is definitely the trick that helped the green kind of stand out and really come alive in this look. 'Cause like I was saying, Toxin is just doesn't have a whole lot of pigment to it, so it kind of can get faded and blend into my skin a little bit too much. So using this, it definitely popped a lot more, and I was really happy with how my outer corner ended up looking here. Putting on a little bit of glitter primer before diving into the shimmers. I'm going to be taking Potent, and I'm putting that on the inner half. This shade, I really like this orange. Again, this is one of the formulas that's very smooth, very sparkly, very easy to pick up with a brush. I had no issues working with it, and it also just like looks very nice on the lid. It's very smooth on your eyelid, not textured at all. So overall, this was a shade that I found easy to apply and very easy and beautiful to wear. And then to pair with that, I took Pheromones, and I'm putting that on the rest of the lid. And this purple also, same type of texture as Potent is. It's very smooth and easy to pick up on a brush. And the orange and the purple I thought blended very beautifully into each other. It was a very seamless blend, kind of going back and forth with the two colors on a brush. And yeah, overall very happy with both of these shimmers. They're easy to pick up, they're easy to work with, and they have so much shine. For my lower lash line, I dipped into ink, and I'm taking a really tiny brush and putting it right against my lower lash line before picking up Camouflage and putting that right on top, and then blending all of that out with Toxin. And I really liked how this kind of just married what I had going on above my eye to what I had going on below my eye. Toxin, definitely a very nice shade to blend out, you know, because it gives you a very effortless diffusion out onto your skin. And then for my inner corner, I took Regal, and I'm popping this right in there. And as you can see on a very dense brush, it does show up very nicely, but it's just a little bit tricky to actually get it on your eyes. But anyway, that is going to do it for the look. This is probably my favorite look from the palette. If I had to pick a favorite, this one with all the different colors and how the shimmers on the lid shine, it just is my favorite, I guess. But anyway, wear time for this as well. Also, I was really happy with the wear time. I didn't notice any kind of fading or creasing with this look. And overall, yeah, just super happy with how this look turned out. All right, you guys know the drill. I always love to hear which tutorial was your favorite, which eye look stood out to you the most and that you just enjoyed the most. Let me know that down below in the comments. But anyway, let's get into talking overall. What are my thoughts and opinions on this palette? And overall, I'm really happy with this palette. Like I said, I love the cover. I love the theme for this palette. It's very, very beautiful. Definitely stands out in my collection as like a display piece. And then also too, when we get into kind of like as I was talking in the beginning, I love the tones in here. Yes, it's a rainbow palette, but there is a little bit of like a grunge to each of the colors that I really do like. I love this dark row here. It's just, they're so very beautiful. And I feel like while I do enjoy having a nice black to deepen up a look, some of these, especially over here, were dark enough that I never felt like I needed a black. Like in today's look, I didn't use a black, but you almost would think I did just because of how deep and dark and just gorgeous my outer corner was. But like I said, her matte shadows are just so beautiful and intense and pigmented that I didn't need to include a black, but it is there if you want it. I tend to not like to answer the question like, do you need it? Or I tend to not want to like press you guys when you guys are watching this saying, oh yes, I definitely think you need to go out and purchase this. I just kind of like to share with you guys my thoughts and opinions on the palette, and then you know, watching my tutorials, watching my review, you can decide if you need it or not. And overall, I'm very happy I have this in my collection. And even though I own the Blend Buddy Blends palette, which is right here, and I just recently tried it, I feel like this brings something different to my collection and definitely is like a rainbow palette with just a little bit more me. Like I said, there's just something within these tones that just gives it a little bit of grunge, gives it a little bit depth. I don't know, it's just not like a bright neon or even just a bright rainbow palette. It's really, really beautiful. I did really enjoy it. If there's any kind of like little qualms, as I was saying during the tutorial, I do wish some of these lighter colors up here stood out more for the colors that they are. That was the most disappointing aspect of this palette for me. I really wish that, yes, I like that she kept these tones lighter so you can use them to really blend out and whatnot, but I wish they would have kind of had more of an impact when it came to the color that they kind of go along with. So more of an impact on the yellow, more of an impact with the green in here, just so that they really stood out, because I love doing an all matte look, and having lighter tones kind of pastelish on my lid is really, really pretty, but these just kind of ended up looking white in my opinion when I was looking at the finished look. They just look like I used a white matte or something. So that's really the only big bummer when it comes to me for this palette. And then the shimmers, like I said in the beginning, this is my first time trying them, and overall I'm not like super impressed and blown away, as you guys have heard. I think that they're nice, and I definitely got really gorgeous looks. I love the sheen that they give when you actually get them on your eyes. They're a little tough to put on, and I'm not the biggest fan of the texture of Regal because it's very kind of like super shocky type of shadow, so it's hard to pick up and whatnot with a brush. But the other ones were relatively easy to pick up. They just took a little bit of time transferring from the brush to my eye, and I definitely felt like if I just, you know, if I just use my finger and if I just stopped, you know, trying to use a brush and I just pat it on with my finger, this shine and the intensity was a lot more intense. So, you know, just something to note as you're playing around this palette. If you're someone who doesn't mind using your fingers, it's going to be a lot quicker and a lot more impactful than with a brush. But as it is, they're definitely very pretty. I was surprised by how much I love the depth of these shimmers, because when I initially got it, I was like, oh, I wish they were a little bit more brighter, more intense. But as you can see, like, they stand out on your eyes. They have a lot of shine. This one too, I remember grabbing thinking like it was going to be a very subdued kind of dark type of cranberry, but it stood out. I think I paired it with like the black. It stood out on my eyes, almost looking like a hot pink. Like, it was very bright. So I was pleasantly surprised by the color choices. They definitely popped on your eyes and stood out. Even though they are deeper tones, I still feel like they bring enough lightness to my looks and don't make it, you know, too terribly dark. But formula wise, I can't say that this is like my favorite shimmer formula to work with and whatnot. It's definitely pretty. Maybe it'll grow on me as I continue to use it, but overall it's nice, and I'm not opposed to using it if I do have this palette. And I quickly wanted to kind of compare it to the Blend Bunny Blends palette. As I was kind of saying, yes, I have this Blend Bunny palette that is a rainbow palette, and it's kind of like, is a little bit repetitive, but as I think you can see, there's like I was kind of saying during my tutorial, there's a depthness and like a grunginess to the rainbow in this palette that you don't really see in here. This is more of like a true color for when it comes to the rainbow, and this one has just that depth and that kind of grunge, and some of the colors are just so intense, like especially Untamed. Like, there's just something so beautiful and like neon and gorgeous about it that you don't really see in here. And there's also the more the neutrals and the grays in this palette that this one doesn't have. So there's definitely differences between the palette. If you want to see like swatches of these palettes and the other palette, the Surge palette that Blend Bunny launched not too long ago, Millie over at Bad to the Brow like swatched all the colors that were similar on her arm, all three of the palettes. She swatched them all, so if you want to see swatches, definitely head over there. I'll leave the video link down here. But for me personally, when I see these two in my collection, do I mind having them? Am I kind of like, oh, you could have one or the other? I mean, sure, I could have one or the other, or I could have both and be perfectly happy like I am now. I really do, like I said, I really do enjoy it. And even with this palette, there are a lot of those very softer tones in the middle there that kind of remind me of the top row of this palette. So it kind of still has that same kind of fault that I see with this palette of just being too light for my preference when it comes to those lighter tones. But overall, I feel like there was a little more intensity with the colors when it came to the lighter tones. Like, you could kind of see them a little bit more. But there were also some shades in here that I felt like were super repetitive as well. So there's pros and cons with each palette, but there is still, for me personally, within my collection, I am not looking at these going like, okay, now that I have this palette, I can get rid of the Blends palette, or, you know, the Primal palette is the same thing as a Blends palette, I didn't need it. I'm not saying that. For me personally, I really do enjoy having both, and I love the tones in this palette just a little bit more than the Blends palette. Like, the Blends palette is still going to be like in my mind that go-to for just a nice solid rainbow palette. But if I'm thinking like I want a very colorful palette but that has depth and grunge and just a little bit more, I keep using the words grunge, but, you know, primal, animalistic, or, you know, kind of foresty, that type of thing, or tropical rainforest, those type of little bit of deeper tones to it, this is definitely a palette I would want and reach for. So overall, I'm really happy with it, if you cannot tell. That's kind of just to sum it up, give you guys short and sweet one sentence. I'm super happy and pleased with it. So that is going to do it for me though for this video. I hope you guys found it helpful as always, and let me know your thoughts down below about the Primal palette. Did you pick it up? Are you going to pick it up? Do you have the Blend Bunny blends or even the Surge palette? Do you feel like it's not necessary? Or are you just a makeup enthusiast like me who just doesn't mind having two different type of rainbow palettes? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, but I hope you guys enjoyed the multiple looks above all. And with that said, that is going to do it for me. Thank you once again so much for watching. If you want to continue getting daily content from me, I'm over on Instagram. I'm LadyKatie92 over there, and I post reels, up close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. And with that said, I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.